everybody. Welcome to the KDK Sports Talk. I'm Kevon Davis.
And I'm Dalton Koller.
And the first topic we're going to be talking about today is athletics having people taking SATs and ACTs for them and getting into big schools.
So basically, I think the main issue with this problem is basically just kids paying for people to take the SATs and the ACTs for them just so they can get into big schools.
Yeah, from CNN, former basketball star Isaiah Thomas, he responded to an investigation and discussed the state of black male college athletes on the lead with Jake Tapper. So to give insight what happened, he was a basketball player for the University of North Carolina, and he went to study hall. And there was a lady that was helping him, and she was noticing that he couldn't read or write. So she started asking questions of, like, what was your ACT scores and your SAT scores in high school? And he couldn't give a response. And so she started thinking about, is this really, did somebody take your test for you, or did you really just mess up when you came to college?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're looking at it that way, it would just be kind of interesting because it's like, you're at a big school like University of North Carolina, and you're there and you're in study hall, and all of a sudden it seems like you forget how to read and write, and it's kind of just interesting because it's like, well, I mean, how did you get here if you don't even know your SAT or ACT scores? And it's just, I don't even know.
And the crazy thing is she found that 60% of athletes that read, 60% of athletes that go to North Carolina read between 4th and 8th grade levels. That is insane.
Yeah, that is very, very not good.
So whoever's taking their test for them probably should be in jail for it, but I guess if you never get caught in the daylight, then at nighttime no one finds you.
Because I know there's obviously more instances of it that we don't have, but I mean, it's just kind of crazy to think that people could get away with stuff like this in the first place. It's like, how can you possibly want to be a college athlete and you want to play for a big Division I school like this, but then you don't even have the learning capabilities to even be at a school like this?
Yeah, because now I know when I took my ACT and my SAT, they make you pull out your driver's license. Some of them made me pull out my Social Security, but that only happened one time. But other than that, I feel like IDs need to be checked more, and they need to make sure that it matches up with you. So they ask for a picture as well, and I feel like those are the type of steps that need to be taken forward to make sure that nobody's taking tests for these athletes.
Well, that, and I also think with what happened with COVID, when everyone was out, I feel like maybe that was allowing these people to be more lenient and maybe cheat on these SATs and ACTs because they weren't actually in person, so they could maybe get away with a little bit more. So I'm wondering if maybe that had something to do with this. But then you said about the case with Isaiah Thomas, that's not necessarily a newer topic. This is like a couple of years ago. So COVID wasn't a thing at this point. So even the fact that it was happening back then, also probably happening still now, that's a problem.
Yeah, I could only imagine making thousands of dollars in college and you can't even read or write to sign off on a check. So I don't know how they're cashing that, but that's pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, that, and there was also not even just instances of people taking the SATs for them, but also just even if a kid bombed an SAT or an ACT, people just went to the colleges and bribed the athletic directors, say, hey, look, we got a kid here. He's a really good player. He'll really help your program. He didn't do so good in his SATs, but if we just slip you a little bit of money, a little bit of cash, let him in, and we'll be good.
That's why I think a lot of basketball players can get away with it so easily, because their season's in the beginning of the year. So they can go to class in the first half, basketball season comes, and that's why you see a lot of them go one and done, because some of them might not even have the intelligence to go the full year. So once basketball season's done, they put the books away, probably stay at the college, work out, and then they go to the NBA or something like that.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's just, I don't really know necessarily. I mean, obviously what you said about just like making sure there's more background checks, more people looking at stuff like that, what can be done to prevent this from happening more often. And I feel like as of right now, I feel like they're starting to crack down on it a little bit more, but I'd like to see it happen more, cracking down on it, because obviously it's still a big problem, because obviously with also not being able to read and write, that also is a problem for the sport they're playing, because you need to have a certain level of intelligence and communication skills, because unless you're playing a sport like golf, if you're playing basketball, baseball, football, anything, that needs team communication skills. And if you don't have the real capabilities of reading and writing, that could be a major problem on the field.
Yeah, so my thing is, for consequences, should be, one, Scholarship, if they have one, should be stripped away.
100%.
2, probably pay a fine for it. And 3, whoever that high school is needs to get under a little bit more investigation that they let that slip away. Like, if it's someone like me and there's so my name's Kevon Davis. If there's a guy who was like, hey, I'm DeAndre Hopkins, I'm like, well, you're not me, so how did you take this test from me and get into the school?
Yeah.
They need to crack down a little bit more on identity.
Well, that, and I also feel like it's also not only the college and the high school stuff, it's also the people who are in charge are supposed to be watching over the SATs, and the fact that they can just let kids get away with this, like people just show up, and even if whether they know for a fact that's the person or not, they should still be able to know the person that's going there to take the test, and then seeing that it's not the kid that's taking the test, and it should be a huge red flag right off the bat.
And my thing is, for the families, that must be like a huge disappointment to find out that your kid is going to a big time school, but he didn't even do anything to meet the criteria to get into that school. Like coming home saying, Mom, like, I'm sorry, I cheated and they kicked me out now. That must feel detrimental to the family because they trusted you and they really thought that you did a good job on everything and you worked hard for that, but in reality, you really didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I can understand what you're saying. It's really just disappointing to the fact that they could think, like, oh my gosh, we finally have something going for us, because obviously, I would probably willing to say that most of these people, some families are not as successful as others, so they need someone like this to help provide for them. And if it's something like that were to happen, where they're saying, we have a kid and, you know, he's going to be really, you know, pivotal for us, and all of a sudden it's just something like this happens, it not only just puts a bad name on the player himself, but it also puts a bad name on the school where he came from, and also just his family in general.
Yeah, because at the same time, we both play baseball, and you know this. For some kids, sports is the only way out.
Exactly.
So sometimes they may try everything in their power to do whatever they can to get to the next level, and sometimes like this, it happens like that, but it's still morally wrong to do because you're cheating other kids that actually tried and sometimes can't get into big schools like that. So you're cheating them out of the opportunity to get into those schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly just, at times it can be, like some kids that are really just not deserving of it, it's really, they kind of deserve the punishments and stuff like that. But the kids like that, who you said they don't have a way out other than sports, it's really just tragic because, I mean, they really don't have anything else to go off of, and it's just, I don't know, it's just really sad, depressing.
Yeah. So thank you for listening to this. I'm Kevon Davis, and this is Dalton Koller, and thank you for listening to the KDK Sports Talk. In the next segment, we're going to be talking about high school basketball players getting paid from their G League contracts. I'm Kevon Davis. You're listening to the KDK Sports Talk Podcast. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the KDK Sports Talk Podcast. I'm Dalton Koller.
I'm Kevon Davis.
And today, this segment, we'll be talking about NBA G League call-ups and how it has an effect on NCAA college athletics.
So, NBA G League, we all know what it is. And if you don't, it's the league that was created a few years ago that gave the opportunity to high school players to go to the G League and then spend some time there and then get called up to the big leagues, which is the NBA.
So basically, the G League, for someone who hasn't have a great understanding of it, it's basically just minor leagues for basketball. That's basically what it is. It's a bridge from either high school or college, a little bit of a stepping stone to then get up to the NBA.
So the reason this NBA G League got brought up is because there were basketball players where it started, like RJ Barrett, Zion Williamson, were big names, and people were saying they have the talent to go to the NBA straight out of high school. But obviously that rule isn't here anymore. So they needed to go either to college or they would have to play overseas. But then the NBA created the G League, which was a quicker process for them to get called up to the NBA than spending maybe a year or 2 years at college.
Yeah. So I know a lot of bigger names that before this rule was put into place with the G League, guys like LeBron James and big name players like that coming out of high school who were all people thought to be NBA ready already. But it was just kind of a problem because it's like, well, it's taking away from these college schools who want these big name players and their talent to be showcased on a national level instead of just going straight to the NBA. They want to be, have a little bit more, I guess you want to say, clout from these players like that.
Yeah, because somebody like Zion Williamson that went to Duke for a year, with his body and his frame and the way he dominated the game in high school, there was really no reason for him to go to Duke. And I'm a Duke
Yeah.
fan, but there was really no reason for him to go there. He could have gone straight to the league, and maybe they could have prepared his body a little bit more than when he's going through now because he's injured. And maybe they could have prepared his body, could have gave him the right nutrition foundation, but
Exactly, because I know even in high school and honestly even in college too, when he was at Duke, he was just still way bigger, way stronger, and honestly way more athletic than a lot of the guys there. And it was just him. It was absolutely tormenting other schools and other programs. And I honestly feel like even though people thought he was NBA ready, now look at him now. He's put on a little bit of weight. He's injured. And honestly, like you said, if he had spent just a little bit more time with Duke, they could have given him a proper training program, a proper exercise program, a diet, a meal plan, and they honestly could have just even more so prepared him for the NBA so that he wouldn't be in the position that he's in now.
yeah, the twist to this NBA G League, though, is players signed by the NBA G League whose rights are not owned by the NBA teams are free agents are eligible to be called up by any of the 30 NBA teams. More than 30 NBA G League prospects has received call-ups to the NBA in each of the past 7 seasons. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so then past call-ups have included current ABA standouts Chris Anderson, the league's first ever call-up to the Denver Nuggets in 2001, and other guys like Danny Green, who went from the Reno Bighorns to the San Antonio Spurs, Gerald Green, who went from the Los Angeles Defenders to the Nets, Hassan Whiteside, who went to the Energy to the Miami Heat, Kevon, who went for the Rapids Drive to the 76ers. You got Yogi Ferrell, who I honestly have never heard of before, but went from the Long Island Nets to the Dallas Mavericks, and Andre Ingram, who went from the South Bay Lakers and Los Angeles Lakers back in 2017-18. And it's honestly just seeing some of these names. I mean, honestly, when they were in the G League, I obviously know they were probably balling out and doing them. And then even some guys like Danny Green, Hassan Whiteside, Gerald Green, even now, even in their NBA, they're still doing really well. So I think the G League definitely had a big impact on their skill set now.
Yeah, because I remember watching Danny Green back in North Carolina when he balled up on Duke a couple times. It kind of broke my heart. But I remember watching him, and I remember that year he got drafted to Cleveland. And I was like, dude, this dude's playing with LeBron? I was like, no way. And then he hit like 4 threes in a row. And I was like, well, I guess all that time in the G League developing him and getting his shot ready really helped LeBron out. And that year they made it to the finals, but they fell short to the dominant Spurs team with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and all them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also kind of interesting because it's seeing you're looking at these player names and honestly how it's honestly still kind of taken away from NCAA college athletics too, because again, there are some of these guys, like you said, like Zion and people that just are only there for 1 year and then they just go straight to the NBA, they go to the G League. And it's honestly kind of upsetting because we miss out on players like that building their draft stock. Because also that could be a big thing for guys who are taken later in the first or into the second round who spent a year or two at a college and then just went straight to the NBA draft. Maybe if they spent more years in college playing for a team, they could be, building their draft stock, be a higher first-round draft pick, and honestly just earning themselves more acclaim and honestly even more money and more success in the NBA.
Yeah, because a guy like Jalen Green, the point guard for the Rockets that's balling out right now, he's a Rookie of the Year frontrunner, and he went to the G League and he had a bunch of D1 offers and everything. And it kind of takes away from college athletics because the G League sports aren't really televised on TV.
No.
Those of more like live stream, you kind of have to catch them when they're going on. And the big schools like Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, you can watch them on ESPN.
They're nationally televised schools, and that brings a lot of people and viewers income to watching them play.
Yeah, so some of these players you don't even get to watch, and you come up to the NBA draft, it's like, oh, well, I forgot that guy even played because I haven't been able to watch him on TV. Versus other guys at the big schools where you see them every week, they get a better scouting grade because they're playing on TV more. Versus someone like the G League, they might not get enough film from them.
Exactly, and also another guy that is not really listed here, but a guy like Lonzo Ball, who was in the G League, and then he was number 2 in the draft. And honestly, right now, he's not saying he's a bust as of yet, but I feel like if he would have spent more time with, being in college, he wouldn't be as, dropping down in the levels as he is now. Because obviously he's not paying up to the capabilities that we all expected him to out of high school. So maybe, just maybe, if he spent more time in college, he would have been, even furthering his skill set that he already had, and he would be an even more prominent, dominant point guard in the league.
Yeah, because someone like Lonzo Ball with his brother LaMelo Ball, his father LeVar Ball said the youngest one will be the best one.
Yeah.
And LaMelo Ball was second in Rookie of the Year, and he balled out this year, first-time All-Star at the All-Star break. And he's leading currently his team to the playoffs right now. So I feel like with that hype with Lonzo kind of shifted over to LaMelo because they were expecting Lonzo to be the big guy, but LaMelo's actually taken in his footsteps. And everybody's like, well, that's what I wanted you to be, but your younger brother was the actual one to outshine you.
Well, then it's also kind of just interesting because speaking of the Ball boys, it's also kind of interesting to think about the fact that where they came from high school. Because it's honestly some of these bigger name high schools like the Chino Hills and the stuff and the schools like that are honestly starting to become big names in themselves and honestly are starting to find themselves up there with the guys like the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Gonzagas, the schools like that. And it's honestly kind of interesting to see how these high schools, just the high schools, not even the G League, not even anything like that, are also having an impact on college basketball because they already have such a big platform from these high schools like that honestly it also kind of takes away from the college basketball because it's like, well, I saw this kid ball out in high school and I saw him play all the time, so honestly, right now, he might actually be NBA ready right now.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about Chino Hills, what a lot of people don't know is that's a public high school. That's not a private school. And not a lot of big names come out of public schools because most of them go to private schools. You get a little bit more exposure and you travel to different places.
Yeah.
So them coming from a public high school is a really big deal for them.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the KDK Sports Talk Podcast. On the next segment, we will be talking about college athletes receiving brand deals and using their likenesses to make money. Thank you for listening to the KDK Sports Talk Podcast with Dalton, Koller, and Kevon Davis. Stay tuned.
All right, we are back. I'm Kevon Davis.
And I'm Dalton Koller.
And now it's time to talk about college athletes receiving brand deals and using their licenses to make money. So the NIL rule, if you never heard of it, it's the NCAA's long prohibited athletes from accepting any outside money. It did this to preserve amateurism, the concept that college athletes are not professionals and therefore do not need to be compensated. The NCAA believed that providing scholarships and stipends to athletes was sufficient.
So beginning Thursday, at the time of this article, which came out in 2022, earlier this month, Division I athletes will have no major restrictions on how they can be compensated for their NIL. In the past, athletes could be suspended or lose eligibility if they violated the rules.
So, thing about this is Ed O'Brien, whose lawsuit against the NCAA in the early 2010s prevented the organization from licensing the likeness of athletes for its commercial purposes with the act called Fair Pay to Play. And LeBron James sat next to California Governor Gavin Newsom as he made it legal for states to schools to prohibit athletes from making money off their name, image, and likenesses.
The law, which is scheduled to be enacted in 2023, supersedes any rules set by the NCAA, and it set the path for what we'll see this week.
So you can already tell this is a big situation if you have a guy like LeBron James, who's globally known as one of the best basketball players to ever live. And he's even coming out saying, hey, we're going to make this fair to play act that prohibits these schools from using their name for licenses, names, images, so these kids can actually get paid for them using their own name.
Well, I know, for instance, some of these big-name college players, like a couple years, it was the Trevor Lawrence and then Justin Fields and all these big names coming out of college. I feel like they would be able to, be a part of these brand deals and be making a lot of money for themselves and honestly help furthering their brand even more if they were to be able to, have access to these brand deals and using their likenesses and stuff like that.
Yeah, because somebody like Mikey Williams, who's the top class of his 2024 for basketball in high school, he received a Puma deal, and the reason he was able to do that is because he's going to the G League. So he was able to receive a deal from Puma, and now he's sponsored by Puma, and he's getting paid thousands of dollars. And that could help him towards his family, any financial problems they're having. That's why I feel like it should be the same for college athletes, because you never know what they're going through. They might actually need that money to help them and their families for different situations.
Yeah, so you're saying how he went to the G League, and that's how he was able to get the Puma deal. And if he went to college, played some big league school like that, he wouldn't be able to receive those same benefits.
No, and it's crazy to think that someone like LeBron, even as big as he was coming out of high school, he couldn't get a brand deal because he was still in high school and he couldn't get something till he came into the league. But once he came into the league and Nike gave him that lifelong contract, which is deserved because it's LeBron James and that's the best talent to come out of high school, you see something like that and it's like, okay, well, if we have something like that, something like a Mikey Williams or a Zion Williamson, when they could have got it to him before he went to college, they should probably try and attack athletes out of high school that are like, hey, you're a big name. If you come to the G League, you can sign with us and you can get a shoe deal, which can help you for anything that you need.
Well, I know also there's other instances of this rule coming into place, people not using their likenesses. For example, the football YouTuber D-Strong, he used to play, real name is Donald De La Haye. He used to be a kicker at UCF, and he was on very big scholarship, very highly touted kicker in college. And he started making YouTube videos because he just wanted to do something else on the side just to make some extra money. And then after a couple of videos, NCAA stepped in and was like, hey, you can't do this. This goes against our rules. You're using your likeness to make money. So you have a choice. Either you can stay at UCF, you can continue to be a kicker, you can keep your scholarship, or you can continue making YouTube videos and you'll be off the team, you'll be out of the college. And he chose YouTube, which I don't necessarily know. Me personally, I don't know if that was the move I would take, but for him, he's still making videos. He's very successful. He's getting to meet a lot of big name players. He even played in the CFL with the Argonauts a couple years ago, so he's still creating a big platform for himself, even though he was aside from NCAA and college football. So it's obvious that big names like this, they can generate and build their own brand aside from playing in college, and they can do other things to reach a bigger, greater audience to eventually get themselves to a place where they want to be.
Yeah, speaking about destroying, beginning Thursday, athletes will be allowed to make money off their celebrity. Some examples like sponsored social media posts or advertisements, sponsored videos on Twitter and YouTube, training lessons and summer camps, autograph and merchandise sales. Like talking about destroying, I mean, that would have been great for him if he could have posted his stuff on social media and YouTube and got money off of it, but kind of caught the short end of the stick there with him.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of this was kind of a couple years before this rule was put into place. And it was just kind of interesting because if he was able to do both, be kicking every other Saturday for UCF and also making these YouTube videos, it could also give younger kids who maybe themselves want to be playing in college in any sport they want to, it can give them a little bit of insight on what to expect for when they get to this level, saying all the work you have to put in on the outside, how you have to balance sports and school and getting your degree. And it would honestly just be kind of educational for these kids to know what they'd be going through when they eventually get to this level.
Yeah, and for some instances, sometimes, colleges or somebody might try and backdoor slip you a brand deal. Like, for instance, Sharif Cooper with Auburn, they were under investigation with him because the coach that was recruiting him was bribing him with money that they couldn't provide because, like you said, it wasn't allowed. And when they got caught, he was suspended for the season. But because he was such a good player and they knew his potential, he ended up getting drafted for the Hawks.
Mm-hmm. So what is not changing with the rules? So this rule does not affect the rules about choosing a school. So athletes will not be able to accept payments or kickbacks for choosing one football program over another. Like you said, there would not be any bribes allowed. So this is simply for third-party deals. There will still be stipulations, many of them on a school-by-school basis. Schools will need to decide whether an athlete can sign a deal that competes with a pre-existing university deal. For instance, a school like Boston College, they will be able to allow a football player to sign a deal with New Balance even though the team is still sponsored by Adidas, which would be kind of interesting because, again, that kind of just goes against who they're sponsored by. So I wonder if the player would still be allowed to do that.
Yeah, because it would look pretty weird if your whole team is, because, a team sport is all about unity. Everybody needs to be the same. If we're wearing long socks, everybody needs to wear long socks. And it's kind of weird if you see a big name guy and he's wearing Under Armour, and you guys are sponsored by Adidas.
Exactly.
And just because he got a deal, Brent, he's like, well, I want to get paid, so forget about the team unity. I need to make sure I get my money, and you guys can do what you want for the team.
And athletes will not be able to use their university logos and trademarks in advertisements. So if you see a BC women's lacrosse player hosting a summer camp but not wearing the Soaring Eagle, that's why.
Yeah, but for me, I would feel like if I'm a big-time athlete and I go to a college like Boston College, I would want to wear my shirt because maybe they might know you and be like, hey, you go to Boston College. Can you tell me about the perks that's going there and everything about that? And maybe they might want to come there. And when they ask, why'd you come here? Be like, hey, I saw you at a camp, and that's what made me want to come here more.
Well, also, not even just the players individually, but this could also have a huge impact on other things with college athletics. For example, I know for a lot of people, the NCAA college football video games are a cult classic for people like that. And they had to stop making them because this rule was put into place. But now that this is coming back, I feel like we'll see a big return for this video game franchise. And with that, not only will it be giving people an alternative to playing a football video game, because right now all they really have is Madden. That's all they have, because EA pretty much just put a huge monopoly on the football game franchise. But now that this is coming back and NCAA football can make a return, it would just generate even more viewers and people soaring to the sport and watch college football and college athletics in general.
And a big name to point out that happened to, Reggie Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Reggie Bush was a big name, and because he had deals at USC, they took his Heisman away, which some people still to this day think that was kind of wrong just because he took a deal. And that doesn't mean you should strip away something that he worked all night and all day for.
Exactly.
So in today's KDK Sports Talk Podcast with Kevon Davis and
Dalton Koller,
we talked about college athletics receiving brand deals and using their likeness to make money, high school basketball players getting paid from their G League contracts, and athletes having people take SATs and ACTs for them to get into big schools.
So basically all these big rules are being put into place, and it's all just saying how it impacts the athletes themselves, the programs, the schools, and honestly just NCAA in its entirety.
So I'm Kevon Davis.
And I'm Dalton Koller.
Thank you again for listening to the KDK Sports Talk Podcast.